So what is it like? That's the question you should always be asking about the present. What the hell is this like? And every day, in every edition of the New York Times, somebody will tell you that it's the 1930s. And then in the Washington Post, somebody will tell you that it's the 1970s. But I'm here to tell you that all these analogies with the mid-20th century are of no use at all, because the structure of the public sphere has been changed so much by the internet that it's nothing like the mid-20th century, our time. Our time most closely resembles the period after the late 15th century, when the printing press, oh, you'll laugh, sir. That's what I like to hear, incredulity. Because it's a typical American response that anything that happened before the United States is irrelevant to the history of the United States. You're wrong. You're so wrong. Let me show you how wrong you are. Nothing has happened like the impact of the personal computer and the internet since the advent of the printing press. And here's the proof. If you look at the impact of these two technologies, it's incredibly similar. The effect of the technological innovation is drastically to reduce the cost of producing content and drastically to increase the volume of content. These two graphs are the same, one for the printed book, the other for the personal computer. What's the difference? The time scale. History today happens 10 times faster than it did at the time of the printing press. But that's the only significant difference, except for one more I'll come to. So the better analogy for thinking about our time is not the 1930s. It's not Watergate. That's all very interesting, but we live in a different time. We live at a time of massive technological disruption of the public sphere, and most of us underestimate it, especially those of us who cling to old ways of getting information like newspapers made of paper. We underestimate the extent to which our time is a time of communications revolution as dramatic as the time of the Reformation. Oh, yes. This is a scary analogy. It is not a funny analogy, sir. It is a bloody terrifying analogy, because when they introduced the printing press into Europe, everything was going to be awesome. Martin Luther, for it was he, just 501 years ago said, if everybody can read the Bible on a printed version of the text in their own language, everything will be awesome. He didn't quite use that word. What he actually said was, we'll achieve the priesthood of all believers the Bible speaks of. Not quite what happened. What happened was that, Martin Luther's sermons were rapidly spread throughout all of Europe thanks to rapid production by printing presses. But so were books like the Malleus Maleficarum, which argued that witches live amongst us and have to be burnt at the stake. That book, the Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of Wickedness, was one of the bestsellers of the 16th and 17th century. That's a good example of fake news. And it's a good example of something going viral that is a good deal more harmful than a cat video. You know how it is that people are always wanting to tear down statues these days? Have you noticed that? And rename things? Iconoclasm is a typical product of a disruption of the public sphere. Suddenly we must efface the icons of the previous era. That happened in the period of the Reformation too, as in this illustration of a church getting a full Protestant makeover in Antwerp in 1566. Polarization in the 16th and 17th century escalated rapidly from verbal violence, you're a heretic, no, you're a heretic, no, you're a heretic, into actual violence. The threshold between verbal violence and actual violence is a very fragile fence. And they crossed it. And they spent 130 years crossing it. The wars of religion that persisted from the Peasants Revolt that followed Luther's Reformation all the way to the end of the 30 Years' War in 1648.